Candlemas Day was a big day in the church. It was a tradition in the church. So basically, Candlemas Day officially ends the Christmas season. So on February the 2nd, it's 40 days from the birth of the baby Jesus. And what happens 40 days after a birth, a woman gives birth, then the woman is allowed to go back into the temple.
Okay.
And so there was a tradition, if a woman, a Jewish woman, had a birth, then was 40 days for a boy after the child was born, and 60 days for a girl after the girl was born, that the person would be allowed to go back and worship into the temple. And that actually then translated into a Christian custom. So there was, in some Christian churches, where there was what they referred to as a ceremony or a cleansing ceremony. They were welcomed back 40 days after the birth. And at that ceremony, candles were lit. And so on Candlemas night, they blessed the candles that would then be used for the rest of the ceremonies on the Christian calendar.
And you say these candles were displayed in town, in homes in town?
Oh, well, what would happen is that you go to church for Candlemas, and then you would bring these candles home. And one of the first things that was done is that the mother would, and it was always the mother who would take the candles, and she would make the sign of the cross on her children with the candles. So blessing their, the hats on their head and all of that, or over their shoulders.
Now, this must have been a huge pageant in the cathedral.
This would have been huge. So the way it would have happened, everyone would take a candle, the candle would have been blessed, and then there would be a procession either around the exterior of the church, or most often, because it was February, it would take place within the church, and people would walk about the church holding the candles that had just been blessed and lit.
And this was an established tradition not only in St. John's, but right across the province?
Or right across the province. So most people would remember going to their small parish church, and that same ritual would take place. In fact, it was an international. It wasn't like a Newfoundland exclusive ceremony. It would very much part of all church tradition.
And the wax was allowed to drip onto the children's head or shoes?
The head, the shoes, the shoulders, just as a sign of blessing. And there was always, because Newfoundland was always a fishing culture, and not only in one's home, but in one's place of business. So in terms of Newfoundlanders, that was on boats. So you always had a blessed candle from the Candlemas ceremony that was placed in your boat that you would light, especially like if a gale came up or a storm came up on you.
Interesting tradition. Of course, Candlemas Day is still celebrated, but not to that extent, I would think.
No, not to the same extent. In fact, there'd be a lot of younger people. If you said to them, Happy Candlemas Day, they wouldn't know what you were talking about. But that's where this tradition comes from.
Now, we also know winter is half over.
And winter is also half over. So this is the day when most people recognize that it is. We're halfway through the winter. So it's between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. I guess that's how the meteorologists would describe it.